Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Okay, in the last lecture we discussed about fallacies of informal fallacies, in particular red herring and strawman, and then we also discussed something about fallacies arising out of weak induction. So inductive arguments can be weak when, especially when the conclusion of course probably follows from the premises, but premises are not strong enough to provide evidence to believe the conclusion to be true enough. So these are, they all come under the category of fallacies of weak induction. So under fallacies of weak induction we discussed one particular kind of fallacy which is considered as a mistake in the argumentation, especially when the arguer is citing some kind of unqualified authority and then he poses some kind of conclusion, then the arguer is said to have committed this particular kind of fallacy, which is called as fallacy by appealing to unqualified authority. So some of the examples which we discussed in the last class, sometimes let us consider some more examples to establish this particular, to understand this particular kind of fallacy. For example, if you say this, that all of us know that Professor Amartya Sen is considered to be a well-known economist, Nobel laureate, etc. Suppose if he all of a sudden he starts talking about a different kind of topic, let's see what is there in this example. Professor Amartya Sen, universally respected economist and the author of Argumentative Indian, has said that destruction of tropical rainforests is one of the 10 most serious worldwide problems. Thus it must be the case that is indeed a very serious kind of problem. So the arguer here, and we know that economist will have expertise in some areas and all, probably maybe in economics, partly be in mathematics maybe, because economics requires strong mathematics, foundations in mathematics, or maybe some other areas which are slightly connected to economics. All of a sudden if we start, suppose somebody is referring to someone who is considered to be an economist and then trying to talk about something related to deforestation, etc. and all, he may not be having that particular kind of expertise and all, then clearly we can say that, so the arguer is said to have committed this mistake in the argumentation in the sense that he is citing unqualified authority. Professor Sen might be having authority in some other areas such as economics, welfare economics, etc. So in this case the arguer is said to have committed kind of fallacy which arises due to citing unqualified authority. So there are some kind of questions we need to ask ourselves to judge when an authority is reliable, unreliable, etc. Suppose if you say that everything the president says is true, and you will also say that the president says that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, etc. Of course the president has authority, and then in the case of in Indian context, if the prime minister says something, then you will definitely say that usually he will not talk whatever he wants to talk and all, but a well established kind of things usually he talks and all. So if the president of United States, for example, says that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, therefore Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, it's most probably that you will usually believe that conclusion to be true given the premises are true. The conclusion probably follows from the premises, since the president of United States of America is saying that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction, probably you might believe that it is true. So there are few questions which we need to ask ourselves to judge that whether a person is having a qualified, whether a person is considered to be having genuine authority, a qualified authority, or whether the arguer is citing some kind of unqualified authority. So these are the critical questions one need to ask oneself. Is the proposed person or source a genuine authority and all? In the last example, Professor Sen seems to be talking about some kind of deforestation, etc. and all. Then we said that he doesn't seem to be having some kind of expertise in that particular kind of area. Had it been the case that he spoke about something related to economics or something like that, definitely that seems to be some kind of genuine authority. And the second question which we will be asking ourselves is that did the authority make the attributed claim or not? If the answer is yes, again it is considered to be some kind of qualified authority. If it is not, it is coming under the category of unqualified authority. The third question is that are the authority and claim made, whatever is made, is relevant to the subject matter or not? If you make some kind of irrelevant claims etc and all, then it is called as, it will come under the category of unqualified authority. So this is what is considered to be a fallacy by citing some kind of unqualified authority. So it's not all the time it's easy to judge whether a person is having authority in that particular area or not, because a person may be having expertise in more than one particular kind of subject matter branch. So okay, so we will move on to the next kind of fallacy. So this kind of fallacy arises because of ignorance. So it is called as appeal to ignorance kind of fallacy. The structure of this argument is like this. This statement, whatever the statement which is trying to prove, this statement has not been proven true, and hence the conclusion is that this statement is false. So it is taken for granted that nobody could prove certain particular kind of thing. For example, if you say that nobody has proved the existence of God, so that's why God doesn't exist. That he may be that this statement may be reasonably believed to be false. Or the other hand, suppose if the statement has not been proven false nobody has proved the non-existence of God nobody could prove that God doesn't exist they couldn't even prove God exists, and God doesn't exist also they couldn't prove. Now in this case the conclusion is that this statement is obviously true, since nobody could prove that it doesn't it is not the case that God exists and all. Probably he might exist and all, God actually exists and all. So the structure of the argument is like this. We can draw a diagram to see what goes on here. So this is like this. Your premises will be like this. So the premises will be this, that nobody has proved that X is true. The other way of stating the same thing is this, that nobody has proved that X is false. So then from this, so this is what is we have some ignorance about this particular kind of thing. At this moment the arguer knows that nobody has proved that some X can be anything. It can be existence of God, existence of electrons, or maybe any other thing and all. So author believes that nobody has proved that X is true, and hence X is false. Suppose if we take into consideration this one, nobody has proved that X is false and all, because nobody could prove that X is false. Maybe it might be the case that it is true and all. This is probably be the corresponding thing is this, that from this we can show that X is true and all. This is another kind of argument which we can use. So if this is the case, then it is called as appeal to ignorance kind of fallacy. So let us consider a simple example to see how this fallacy arises. So you must note that in all these fallacies that we have been discussing so far, or maybe discussing later also, they are all coming under the category of some kind of persuasive mechanisms. So ultimately the arguer's intention is to persuade the reader or listener to accept his claims and all. So let us consider one example for this appeal to ignorance kind of fallacy. After centuries of trying, no one has been able to prove that God exists. They have tried miserably, and they tried and failed miserably. Many scientific theories have come into existence, but they could not establish that, they could not prove that God exists is true. So the attempt seems to be futile, is useless, etc. So at this point I think we can safely conclude that there is no God. Nobody has proved that God is true, and hence that is the reason why it is false that God exists. So if you conclude in this particular kind of sense, then that means what happened here is you can't prove based on, because there is no proof which is existing and all, that does not mean that a particular kind of sentence can be false and all. It might be the case that someone else might prove it in future or something like that, it may turn out to be true also. So this is what is called as ignorance, in the sense that at this moment you do not know that this is the case and all. So based on that kind of thing you jump to a conclusion that X is false and all. Nobody could prove that X is true, that means X is false. Nobody could prove that X is false, means that X is true and all. So nobody could prove that, for example in the case of crow's example, nobody could prove that crow is white in color, so then you will infer that crow is black in color. But you might find a crow in which somebody might prove that the next crow that he is going to see might be white in color also. That makes the conclusion does not follow from the premises. So in the same way in the courts also you will find this particular kind of phenomena, that unless until you are proved guilty then you will not be punished and all, you will not considered to be guilty and all. So unless until it is proved in the court that you did this particular kind of mistake, you will not be made guilty and all. So just like in this case you can't prove you did not steal that car, so you must be guilty and all. So in that case nobody could prove that he has stolen the car and all, so that is why probably he may not be guilty and all. So these are some of the things which come under the category of fallacy by appealing to ignorance and all. So something that is not proved might still be true, or just as something that isn't disproved might also be false and all. So that makes this argument fallacious and all. So this is what is appealed to ignorance kind of fallacy. There is obviously certain things which will not be knowing and all, so that is what we are calling it as ignorance and all. So the other interesting kind of fallacy which arises in all inductive generalizations which we spoke in the last lecture, where whether we try to justify, when we try to justify inductive generalization, then we are referring to principle of uniformity of nature, and we are asked to justify principle of uniformity of nature, then again we are falling back on induction, and hence leads to some kind of circularity. So all inductive generalizations, if it is not used properly, then it leads to some kind of generalization which is called as hasty generalization. So hasty generalization is exactly opposite of fallacy of accident, that is the one which we have seen earlier. So this is like this. So let us compare fallacy of accident, which is called as fallacy of relevance, and the hasty generalization. So this is what we have said, fallacy of accident. So this is what is fallacy of relevance. This is what we have discussed in greater detail earlier. So now just I am trying to compare this thing with hasty generalization. So now we have a general rule which is misapplied, a general rule which is misapplied to some kind of specific situation, then it leads to this particular kind of fallacy which is called as fallacy of accident. And we said in the last few lectures that freedom of speech is considered to be constitutionally guaranteed right. If that is applied properly and all, there is absolutely there is no problem and all. For example, if that is applied to a specific situation in which a religious leader speech has invoked some kind of riots, So then this general rule, that is freedom of speech is a constitutionally guaranteed right, is misapplied to this particular kind of specific situation, and that leads to this fallacy of relevance. Why I am talking about this fallacy of relevance in the context of hasty generalization? It is simply because of this, that hasty generalization is converse of this fallacy of relevance. That means here it is the other way around, that is a specific case is misapplied, and then you will infer some kind of generalized general rule. So a specific case not representative of whole population, whole group or population or a class or something, and then is not misapplied and generalized. So a specific case not representative of the whole population, a sample or a group, based on that you generalize it and then form some kind of generalization that is usually called as a general rule, then that is called as a hasty generalization. In day-to-day discourse we will be using this particular kind of generalizations all the time. Usually we call with a different name, that is sweeping generalizations and all. So what are these sweeping generalizations and all? In some cases it is a case, that does not mean that it works in all the cases and all. So what is a hasty generalization? Hasty generalization is an inductive argument. Obviously you will be moving from particulars to generals, that means you will be making some kind of inductive generalization. So in which one makes fallacious inference from relatively small number of cases to a generalization about a class of instances and all. You take very small group into consideration and then you start generalizing it and say that it is representative of the whole group or class and all. For example, if you say that one or two students in the entire class, a class of 100 students, one starts cheating and all in the examination and all. So that does not mean that in an entire class is considered to be cheating in that particular kind of course and all. So from two students cheating in the examination, that does not mean that entire class is bad and all. If you make that particular kind of generalization, what we are trying to do is a specific case, that means one or two students are creating problem in the course, cheating, not representative of the whole population and all. 98% are honest and they are good enough and all. So from that you generalize and say that, form a generalized rule and say that entire batch of PHI 142 they are all cheaters etc and all, then that particular kind of person who is making this argument is said to have committed this fallacy, which is called as, he has made sweeping generalizations and it is called as hasty generalization. So when it occurs when there is a reasonable likelihood that the sample is not representative of the whole group. Just two students or one student has committed this mistake and all, it is not representative of the whole class and all. So such a likelihood may arise if the sample is either too small, that is one or two members, exceptions, or it is not even, sometimes it is not even randomly selected and all. For example, in a bag of bag of tomatoes, just you found one rotten tomato and all. Just by seeing one rotten tomato, that does not mean that it is maybe entire basket of tomatoes is bad and all, or you do not choose any tomatoes from that particular kind of bag. So it is not representative of the, at least some sample, at least you have to be collected in random, at least 10, 5, 6 at least, whatever you have collected it from that particular kind of bag, they are all turned out to be rotten, then you can infer that probably all the tomatoes in that bag are rotten ones and all. Here the sample is, if the sample is not selected randomly or if it is too small, then it is obviously called as a kind of weak inductive kind of argument and all. So to make a case that this particular kind of fallacy has been committed, what one needs to do is this, that the number of instances in the premises do not warrant the inference to the general class of which those instances are a member and all. what one needs to show that number of instances in the premises do not warrant the inferences to the general class in which those instances are a member and all. So one needs to be able to show that this kind of generalization does not follow and all. So from one particular kind of specific case and then you generalize to a general rule, then you are said to have committed this kind of mistake in the argumentation, which is called as hasty generalizations. So let us consider some examples to establish this point and all, where we are trying to make some kind of sweeping generalizations. Suppose if you say that most of the Ford cars are bad and all. So from that, if you infer that I once owned a Ford car and it was utter junk and all. So suppose if you infer this particular kind of thing, it so happened that you got a defective kind of car, and from that you cannot infer that all Ford cars are bad and all. Here the conclusion is this, that all Ford cars are worst, bad and all. Why it is the case? He is giving this kind of reasoning and all. I once owned a Ford car and all the time it created problem, and then there was some engine starting of engine, all kinds of problems, etc. and all. Ultimately it so happened that out of your bad fortune or something like that, you got a defective car which couldn't be repaired, etc. and all, and so happened that it turned out to be a worst kind of experience for you. So from that you cannot generalize and say that all Ford cars are waste, etc. and all, bad or worst and all. In the same way, in the second example, if the arguer is arguing in this sense, divorce is rampant in America, Mary, someone is saying, I heard that 40% is communicating to Mary in saying this particular kind of, I heard that 40% of the marriages end in divorce within 3 years, so I have decided not to marry you because the odds are against you and all. Odds are against us means that we might belong to this particular kind of 40% of the category, and then there is every chance that we'll get separated after 3 years and all, based on the statistical data that they have. It doesn't make any sense to talk about this particular kind of arguments and all. I mean the person who is making this argument is making some kind of sweeping generalizations, or it is called as hasty generalization. Suppose in the third example, suppose if a concerned citizen says that this man is an alcoholic, so then liquor should be banned and all. Suppose he has seen one drunkard who is behaving in a very bad way, bad manner, etc., destroying the property, all kinds of things, then you say that all the liquor should be banned and all. Maybe sometimes you might use it in a proper sense and all, but just because of one particular case which has happened, doesn't mean that you should completely ban the liquor and all. So like this, a frustrated Ford owner might say that my car broke today. Ford's that's why he wanted to reach a particular place, but he couldn't reach because his car broke down today. So ultimately, out of frustration, he is saying that Fords are worthless pieces of garbage, etc. And goes on so and so. He says then the arguer is said to have committed this particular kind of mistake in the argumentation, which is called as he is said to be making sweeping generalizations. Is just because of one specific case, you cannot move and say that for all the other things which represents a particular kind of sample, this particular kind of thing follows. So these are some of the examples of sweeping generalization, which is called as hasty generalizations and all. So again you have to note that premises are not sufficient enough to provide evidence to believe the conclusion to be true, probably true in that particular kind of case, and hence it makes that argument a weak argument. So the next kind of fallacy which we commonly see in day-to-day discourse also is that it's a false cause fallacy. So what is a false cause fallacy? Is another kind of fallacies of weak induction. So what happens here is that one will be illegitimately assuming that one possible cause of a phenomena is a cause, although the reasons are lacking for excluding the other possible causes. There may be several causes, etc. and all for the same event and all, same phenomena. If you don't consider the other possible causes which are very important, then you must be ignoring some of the things and all. So false cause fallacy might arise in different ways, especially when we confuse temporal succession with the causal consequence. That is, when we take one event to be cause of another simply because one event happened before the other. If that is the case, then this false cause fallacy arises. It so happened that, for example, every time you came out of your house and you could witness cat passing through, and then something happened, you fell down from your bicycle, or somebody has shouted at you in the office, or some bad thing might have happened. So that happened every time a cat passed through. That doesn't mean that cat passing through is a cause for your miseries, etc. It has nothing to do with that particular kind of thing. Sometimes when we mistakenly take one event to be the cause of another, that is when we assert that the one event is the cause of the other, and we might be simply wrong about that particular kind of thing. That may not be cause of that particular thing at all. There may be some other important causes for that particular kind of thing. So we have said that arguments from cause to effect are inductive arguments. They can become weak in the sense that when we confuse temporal succession with causal sequence, that leads to a problem. And in the same way, one event to be the cause of another one, when we assert that one event is the cause of another one, but we might be simply wrong. So false cause fallacy might also occur when many causes are operative, but one of them is illegitimately assumed to be the sole cause. There may be very important causes which might be existing for explaining the effect and all, but you ruled out the most, you take into consideration a particular kind of cause which may not be directly relevant to the effect and all. In that case also this false cause kind of fallacy arises. So let us consider some examples to establish this particular kind of thing. So before that let me draw a diagram for this false cause fallacy. So this is like this. So false cause fallacy simply arises because of this. You have premises, mainly arguments from cause to effect will come under this particular kind of arguments. They are all inductive arguments, they are weak arguments in a sense that here are premises, and of course you have the conclusion. Usually it will be some kind of causes and this will be an effect and all. Sometimes you move from effects to causes also. This is also another kind of inductive kind of argument. So now it depends upon the movement from premises to conclusion, depends upon non-existent and minor causal. Sometimes that may not exist in all, any causal relationship between the cause and effect that you are trying to say, minor causal connection. So it depends upon either it is a non-existence causal kind of relation, or it may be some kind of minor causal connection. So if that is the case, then this false cause kind of fallacy arises. So let us consider some examples to establish our point. Since I came into office 2 years ago, he joined a new job 2 years ago, the rate of violent crime has decreased significantly. So that is what one police officer is trying to say, let us say. So it is clear that longer present sentences we recommended seems to be working. So they somehow recommended that person who is committed to some kind of crime and all, they were sentenced for a long time, 10-15 years, etc. and all. So they were under the impression that it started working, longer prison sentences that they offered to the prisoners, it worked and all. So that need not be the sole cause for this particular kind of reduction in the violent crimes. It might have been reduced by some other causes might be there. It is not solely due to the long term sentences and all. So this is not the only cause and all. So it happens because it depends upon non-existent and maybe sometimes the minor causal connection, etc. This might be imposing long term sentences may be some kind of non-existence cause or maybe a minor causal connection to the fact that rate of violent crime has decreased significantly. In another instance, for example, example 2, the best professional cricketers receive big salaries these days. Everyone knows that they receive big salaries. So therefore, in order to guarantee that Ravi will become one of the best professional cricketer, we should give him big salary. Suppose if you start giving big salary, he might spend it peacefully, and then he may not become a cricketer. If we forget about the cricketer, he may not professional cricketer, but he may not become even cricketer also. He might become an actor with that particular kind of money if you pay that much salary. So this is a false cause and all. So that's why it is called as false cause analogy. So Ravi becoming one of the best professional cricketer has nothing to do with paying big salaries and all. So you should not be paid any big salary in this particular kind of case. Okay. So suppose if you say this particular kind of thing, the scores of standardized tests have been dropping for several decades. What accounts for this? Now you are trying to understand the causal factors for this particular kind of thing. Well, the arguer is arguing in this way. During these last few years, the average time the student spends watching TV, playing games in the computer per day has increased. So the cause is obvious. Students are distracted too much by watching too much TV, DC++, or whatever they download from that particular kind of thing, when they need to be reading instead. So instead of reading, they are distracted to downloading some of the movies, etc. They are distracted from that particular kind of thing. But there might be some students who might be downloading lots of movies and all these things, but yet they perform well in the exam and all. But this is not the only cause for their for dropping of the performance of scores in the standardized tests and all. There may be several other causes which we need to take into consideration, but the arguer here is trying to present some particular kind of causes, a minor causal connections between the problem of standardized tests, scores of standardized tests which is falling, to the distractions that the students come across. So there may be several other reasons, causes for the reduction or dropping of performance in the standardized tests and all. It is not solely due to watching TV or DC++, etc. and all. Although there might be some of the causes for this particular kind of thing, reduction, but there may be several other things and all which we need to take into consideration. Okay, in this case there are many other possible causal factors which needs to be considered. For example, in the first example that if we have said that long term sentences, etc. and all will prevent the crime rate, etc. and all, in that particular kind of case we can ask several other questions like have economic conditions have been improved, or more jobs available, have the demographics of the area changed so that the population of young men, statistically the group most likely to commit violent crimes, etc., these are responsible for it, or is smaller relative, there is enough patrolling in the nights. All these things are relevant causes for this particular kind of thing. This is the one which we are trying to say. Yes, since I came to the office 2 years ago, the rate of violent crime has decreased significantly, so it is clear that long prison sentences we recommended are working. So that may not be the sole cause and all, but there might be several other things. There are other things like these things, police patrolling in the nights, there might be a sufficient cause for that particular thing, or have the demographics of the area changed so that the population of the young men, statistically the group most likely to commit violent crimes. All these things are important factors to causal factors to be considered rather than imposing long term sentences and all. So in the same way, in the third example which we have discussed earlier, the increase in time spending in watching movies, playing computer games is likely contributed to the drop of scores, that no doubt that is the case, maybe their performance in the midterm exam, but insufficient evidence is provided for the conclusion that the time spent watching TV and DC++ is the sole cause and all. There is no sufficient evidence to believe the conclusion to be true. So these are not the sole causes and all, there may be several other causes which might be operating. Okay, this is what is false cause kind of fallacy. Now we will move on to another kind of fallacy which is very interesting, which is called as slippery slope kind of fallacy. All of us might be aware of this slippery slope is the one which we used to play in our childhood. Somebody who is dropping from above, ultimately they will reach down without any much effort and all. So this is one special variety of false cause fallacy, and it is also called as slippery slope kind of fallacy. So this fallacy occurs when the arguer assumes that a chain reaction will occur, but there is insufficient evidence that one or more events in the chain will cause the other one. So the diagram for this particular kind of argument is like this. So with the diagram we can explain slippery slope kind of fallacy. So usually we say that this can be treated as some kind of slippery slope. Somebody who is there here, without any effort, obviously he will come down like this. Usually it will be, the actual slippery slope will be somewhat like this. So but whatever it is the case. So now so this is what is considered to be the first innocent step. So the arguer argues that this, if you make this first innocent step and all, then it triggers another important as a reaction to this, it leads to this one, and then again it obviously leads to this, etc. and all. Ultimately at the end it is going to be some kind of disaster. So a single innocent step leads to some kind of complete disaster and all. So the idea here is the arguer presents in such a way that he says that if suppose if you make this particular kind of step, this leads to the next worst step and all, and this leads to automatically the next worst step, there is no way to come up and all, so you will be falling all the way towards the disaster and all. So here in this case one is causing another one is causing another one, this is a causal chain and all, one causes another, etc. and all, ultimately the end result is some kind of disaster and all. So if that is the case, then it is called as a slippery slope kind of fallacy and all. So this fallacy occurs when the arguer assumes that a chain reaction will occur, chain reaction in the sense that, for example, this is the first step, A, B, C, D, this triggers B, B triggers C, and C triggers D. In every case there is no way in which you can come up and all, so you will be moving towards the disaster only. So this is the next worst step, the next worst step is this, the next worst one is this, ultimately the end result is complete disaster. But the problem here is that this first innocent step may not lead to this particular kind of disaster and all, the chain reaction might not actually take place and all, but the arguer presents in such a way that if you take this one it leads to this, actually this may not be the case and all, and if you take this one this leads to this and all, ultimately it leads to disaster and all. So these are some of the examples for this particular kind of argument. So one example could be like this, they are very interesting and exciting examples and all, but actually this disaster may not happen in these examples and all that we are talking about. So somebody is arguing in this way, never buy a lottery ticket. Now that is the first innocent particular kind of step and all. If you buy that particular lottery ticket and all, so now the arguer is arguing in this way, that triggers another one. People who buy lottery tickets soon find that they want to gamble on horses, so next they develop a strong urge to go to some kind of Las Vegas to bet their life savings in the casinos, etc. and all. Betting was common there in all these kinds of games, etc. So now the addiction to gambling gradually ruins their family life, and eventually they die homeless and lonely and all. So the first step here is that buying a lottery ticket and all, that makes that need not have to lead to this particular kind of thing that they want to gamble on horses and all. So just because buying the lottery ticket doesn't imply that even if they get money in the lottery etc and all, doesn't mean that you will make bets on horses etc and all, and then making bets leads to some other thing like he is not happy with that particular kind of money, and then you will go on and move on to Las Vegas and bet their life savings in the casinos etc. All these things may not one may not lead to the other one and all. The first innocent step is that buying a lottery ticket and all, that has nothing to do with ultimately the end step is that they die homeless, lonely and all, that may not trigger that particular kind of thing and all. So this might stop here itself, this may not trigger the other one itself, but the arguer presents in such a way that as if it is the case that this triggers this, and as a chain reaction this leads to this and this leads to this. Since it is a slippery slope, now it all slips towards the disaster only. There is no way in which you can recover and then come up and all, because it is slippery, so you will only fall and all, you will be falling only all the way down the line. Another simple example which convinces us is this particular kind of example. It so happened that a particular person told a joke in the party and all, so out of his surprise it flopped and all. He thought that everyone will laugh at him, laugh at his joke and all, but it so happened that it flopped and all. Nobody laughed, and then nobody showed any reaction and all. So that is what has happened and all. So now he is started contemplating and all what went on wrong etc and all. Now he is falling into some kind of slippery slope and all. So now he says this particular kind of thing. So everyone there thought that I was a loser, because he presented a joke but nobody laughed at him, he thought he was a fool or something like that. So I will never be invited again. In fact, if word gets out, I won't be invited anywhere. Now he's into some kind of slippery slope and all. Now I am sure that they are all talking about my stupid joke, so I have completely ruined my chances for a decent social life, and there is nothing left for me now but years of loneliness and misery. So how I wish. So ultimately he is under the impression that I wish I would have never told that particular kind of joke. It appears that just telling jokes leads to misery, loneliness and all kinds of things and all. It appears as if that the arguer is presenting in such a way that one triggers another one etc and all, leads to some kind of disaster and all. This causal connection is questionable, doubtful. The first innocent step that he is going to take, that is joke at the party, should not imply that years of loneliness, misery etc and all. That is what is to be considered as a total disaster. So there is no causal kind of chain which seems to be the case existing in this case. So this is called as another kind of false cause fallacy, but it comes under the category of slippery slope fallacy. Another interesting fallacy which we come across in the case of inductive argument is that we said that inductive arguments based on analogy are inductive arguments. If the analogy is good enough, then we say that it is a strong argument. It is a weak analogy, then it is a weak inductive argument. So we use analogies to enrich our language and enlighten us with some kind of understanding. When successful, it becomes appropriate and all. When the analogy is made successful, then obviously the argument will be appropriate and all. So when we make comparisons that seems appropriate but it is not, then obviously we end up with some kind of weak analogy or a false analogy. So this is the example which establishes this particular kind of problem. So the diagram for this particular kind of thing is like this. So in arguments based on analogy, you have premises, that is the structure of any argument and all. You have premises and you have a conclusion, and the arrow says that it depends upon, that means conclusion depends upon inadequate analogy. If analogy is appropriate, then it is considered to be good argument and all, otherwise it is called as it comes under the category of weak argument. So when we make combinations that seems to be appropriate but it is not, we think that it is appropriate but actually it is not, then we end up with a weak analogy or a false analogy. So one example could be like this: if a car breaks down on the freeway or a highway, a passing mechanic is not obliged to render emergency road service and all. So when all of a sudden if a car breaks down and all, and then there is a service center somewhere else, then he is not obliged to offer any kind of offer any emergency road service and all. He need not have to come and help you out and all. But for similar reasons, if a person suffers from a heart attack on the street, a passing physician is not obligated to render emergency medical assistance and all. Here we are comparing braking of car with heart attack person on the street and all. There seems to be some kind of analogy and all in these kinds of things. So on the one hand, if a car breaks down, then the passing mechanic need not have to be obliged to render any emergency service and all. You can say I do not do anything and all. So today is holiday and you come tomorrow and all. But a doctor cannot do this particular kind of thing and all the time 24/7 he needs to offer his services and all. This field itself is medicine field itself is like this, that he has to offer a support to his patients 24/7 and all whenever one is in need. So you cannot this analogy is weak enough, so that's why this is a kind of fallacious argument. So some other examples are this is the example for this particular kind of thing. Appeal to ignorance and all is somewhat different from weak analogy. So in the weak analogy, the problem here is that you pose some kind of conclusions, but the conclusion depends upon some kind of inadequate analogy. If the analogy is not strong enough, then it is called as a weak inductive kind of argument and all. So some other examples which we can consider, and so far we have studied different kinds of fallacies of weak induction. Now let us consider some more problems and see whether what kind of fallacy it is. Now this example says that after centuries of trying, no one has been able to prove that reincarnation occurs. So at this point I think we can safely conclude that reincarnation does not occur. So that is that come under the category of fallacy of ignorance and all. Something is not false means it is true, something is not true means it is false and all. So this kind of thing will come under the category of fallacy of ignorance. Some other examples like this thing, if Professor Bloggs, the well-known astronomer, has done extensive research on distant galaxies, he points out that human bodies are composed of atoms which were once part of distant stars. So to Bloggs, some scientists, this gives human life a sense of drama and significance equal to that of inherent in the world's greatest mythologies and theologies. Thus Bloggs corrects the common error of supposing that materialism reduces to the drama significance of human life and all. There seems to be some kind of some kind of analogy which is present in this one. Seems to be some kind of weak analogy kind of argument. There are several examples in the textbook, Concise Introduction to Logic by Patrick Hurley, and once we solve these exercises and all, we will make our all these things will become quite clearer to us. Another example could be day always follows night, that is a succession and all, temporal succession and all, and the T1 day is the one and T2 you see night and all. This is temporal succession and all. This temporal succession is treated as a causal kind of connection, then you are said to be making this false cause kind of fallacy. So the two are perfectly correlated, therefore what you are saying is night causes day. If that is the case, then it is called as a false cause kind of fallacy. Suppose if you say folk dancing is bad because it leads to some other kind of dancing which is western kind of thing, ballroom dancing, which in turn leads to some kind of modern dancing, and then you are arguing that modern dancing leads to promiscuity, which causes total breakdown in the moral fabric of a country, and hence a lapse into some kind of primitive savagery and all. It looks like that, one leads to another kind of problem, one triggers another one and another triggers another one, etc. and all. It need not be the case that folk dance is the one which triggers the last step, that is usually considered as some kind of disaster, a lapse into primitive savagery and all, that need not have to take place. The first innocent step does not lead to this particular kind of thing and all. It is also some kind of false cause fallacy which we studied in greater detail, that is slippery slope fallacy. So far we have studied in detail about fallacies of relevance and fallacies of weak induction. There are three important fallacies which come under the category of presumption, fallacies of presumption. So these are some of the important things which we commonly see in day-to-day argumentation. Here what will happen here is premises presume what they purport to prove and all. So conclusion is the one which we need to establish, but that is also already presumed and all in the premises. So it results when an arguer makes some kind of unwarranted assumption. Usually such assumption is illegitimate and unjustified and all. There are three such kind of fallacies which we will be talking about. There one is begging question fallacy, complex question fallacy, and false dilemma fallacy. We will consider one particular kind of fallacy and then we will end this lecture. So this is one of the frequently found kind of fallacy which goes like this. An argument begs the question when it assumes the point to be proved. That is, begging the question is also known as arguing in some kind of circles. One example could be like this. Suppose somebody is arguing like this: God exists because Bible says so and all. Bible or Gita or Quran says so. But how do I know that that Bible says is true? Because it is God's word and all. God's word, etc. and all. So now here, what is the guarantee that God's word is true and all? Again you will fall back and say that God exists because Bible says so. And the argument goes on in circles, etc. and all, and each step it begs some kind of question and all. Premises presuppose that God already exists and all. Based on that you are trying to argue, then that's why it begs the question and all. So this is called as begging question kind of fallacy. So the conclusion, although valid, sound, yet it begs some kind of question and all. So from the standpoint of convincing others and from the standpoint of discovering truth, the argument that begs the question is deeply flawed and all, because it begs question at each and every stage and all. So let us consider another example. With this we will end this lecture. God does not exist. Suppose if you ask why, then he is giving these reasons. Because natural selection is true, and according to the natural selection all species come into being by purely blind natural forces. And how do you know that natural selection is true? Well, it is the best scientific theory and all. Because of its best scientific theory, obviously it has to be true and all. So you are falling back on, you are arguing in some kind of circles, and you are saying that scientific theories of course by definition exclude any supernatural claims and assumptions. That's why God does not exist and all. One proof we have seen is God exists and all because Bible says so. But here you are proving that God doesn't exist based on natural selection. So you are falling back on natural selection, and on what basis you are saying that natural selection is true? Again you are saying that our best scientific theories are true. On what basis your best scientific theories are true? Again you will say that natural selection is true, and etc. and so on and so on. So in this lecture what we have done is this: we have considered various fallacies of induction, fallacies of weak induction, and then we have seen that in all these cases the premises are not sufficient enough to provide adequate evidence to believe the conclusion to be true, and hence it leads to weak induction and all. All arguments based on weak induction are obviously fallacious and all. There are some other fallacies. All these fallacies are, you should note that they are all persuasive mechanisms. Every fallacy, an arguer has some intention, that is to persuade the arguer or reasoner or listener and all. So all these fallacies are some kind of persuasive mechanisms. They are all important in day-to-day life. When somebody commits this particular kind of fallacy, at least as a reader or listener, whoever is following the arguments from the debates, one should be able to identify the flaws in the argumentation and all. So identifying and detecting the fallacies is another important step which is very important and all. So in all these fallacies in this module in this part, first we started with the formal fallacies, and then we moved on to informal fallacies, where informal fallacies can only be detected by analyzing the content, and in that we classified fallacies of relevance, and then we talked about fallacies of weak induction, and then there are some fallacies which arise out of ambiguity in the language, or it might arise due to some kind of presumptions and all. So begging question, complex question fallacy, etc., these are the things which will commonly come across in day-to-day discourse. They all come under the category of fallacies of presumption and all. So with this we will end this lecture, and then we will move on to formal logic from tomorrow onwards. So in the next lecture we will be talking about some of the important features of syllogistic logics, and these are the logics which have dominated for more than 2000 years. There is definitely something is most important to study these particular kinds of logics, which helps us in understanding some of the important concepts of modern logic. So then we will move on to propositional and predicate logic.